Okay, for this exercise, we're going to work on, we're going to do a gasket design, but the idea of it is to give you a little more practice with constraints and how they affect things and the offset command. So we're going to start with a metric part file template. Okay, so go ahead and open that up. And I'm going to do a 2D sketch on the front plane. And I'm basically just going to draw a few lines and get some horizontal and vertical constraints here. So I'm going to go boop, horizontal, vertical, and say I'm not worried about size. I'm just getting my rough shape in, not constraining anything other than horizontals and verticals. Okay, and now I'm going to pop a circle in over here. Okay, and I want to draw a line connecting the circle to this bottom line, but I want a coincident constraint. I don't want the quadrant. I want coincident. There we go. See, I got the yellow, I got the little yellow pop up there for coincident. And then I want coincident on here, but not to an endpoint or anything like that. Okay. And now we've got these things, and let's show all my constraints just so you can see them there, and so can I. The nice thing about these parametric drawings is I can drag things and I can move things around, and it kind of changes my shape, but my constraints stay there unless I remove those constraints. Okay. So I'm just kind of moving a few things around here a little bit just to give you an idea of what's what. So, I'm editing my shape, but I'm not doing anything finalized yet. Okay. So let's do, I'm going to add a few dimensions and a few constraints here as we're going through. So just follow along. So let's go with a dimension from this vertical line to center of my circle. And right now, size doesn't matter. Okay. And I want to go with a tangent constraint, replace this coincident with a tangent. So let's go tangent, line to circle. See it move those things up. I'm looking at my notes. I think we're good with that. Okay. Now let's take our circle here. Nah, okay, it's good the size it is. So let's trim right here, and let's extend this over. Say, let's close that. All right, now I want to align the center of the circle with this horizontal line. There's two ways you can do it. You can apply a 0 dimension, like that, and it works, but then if you import dimensions into your model, you get a dimension that comes over that says 0. So while it works, it's usually not the best way to do it. As you saw in a previous video, let's do a horizontal constraint. Will horizontal work with that? No, it didn't. Wow, my goodness. Okay, let's try collinear. Weird. Okay, so I guess, I guess the 0 dimension is what we have to do then. I don't like doing 0 dimensions, but I thought we could do a constraint there. So we'll just go with the 0. How about that? Okay. Let's add an overall height dimension now. Okay, and if we look at our notes down here, we've got 6 dimensions still needed. Now you can use the auto dimension command. It will do weird things sometimes, so we're going to do it just to kind of show you what happens. And then you see it gave an angle, but then it gave this really weird dimension off of the angle to the origin. And so it gives you weird stuff sometimes. About the only time I ever use auto dimension is if I can't figure out why I'm not fully constrained yet. And I'll see what it tells me, and then I'll kind of work with it a little bit. Okay, so let's trim out our circle right here, and then apply some more dimensions. We need a height dimension on this piece here. And then the same way on this piece. And then we want one from this end to this corner. And then let's go with a radius there. Okay, so that's got everything dimensioned. It still says I still need 2 dimensions. Part of that is going to be I'm not aligned to the origin here in any way. We'll fix that in a moment. Okay, so next we want to add in some fillets into our part. And so let's go with our fillet command. And the default is 2 millimeters, so we'll go with that. That's fine. And so let's apply a fillet up here. Right there. And at our 2 bottom corners. Okay, so I got all my fillets in at 2 millimeters. Okay, now let's say we want to locate this thing. There's a couple of ways to doing that. We can use a fix, a fixed constraint, which will permanently lock something in the place that it is in, and it's this one here. So we could apply a fixed constraint to the center point of this circle, and then nothing would move. Or we can coincident constraint center of this circle to our origin. Either way, they work fine. Since this is a gasket part, honestly, you can do the fixed, and you can see it puts a little lock on it there, and it tells me now that I'm fully constrained. So that works. The problem being is when you start assembling parts together into an assembly, you can use the XYZ planes as mating surfaces. So you can mate the plane of one part with the plane of another part, and they line things up. So I really like keeping things aligned with my planes in some way or another. So I am going to do coincident constraint for center of my circle to the origin, even though it moved things around a bit there. Okay, that worked. If I'd have done that earlier, I wouldn't have had to have done the 0 dimension. I could have constrained the circle to here and coincident this line onto that x-axis. So now we're fully constrained. Okay, now I've got my general shape that I want. Excuse me. So I want to apply my final dimensions. And we'll start with the larger ones first and work through this thing. We're not going to parametric anything, but we're just going to go through and edit them. That one will be 200. See, I told you it does weird things. That's 45. The bottom one here, 180. Whoop. All right, let's go with our top one here, 120. That one is 50. 40. Now I should be able to fix this one. 180. Okay, so there's my shape I want. The problem being my fillets now are too small. Oh, my fillets should be 20. And since we did them all in the same command, they're all tied to this, they're all equal to each other. Okay, and so there's my dimensions. There's my shape of my part. So I'm going to finish my sketch. I think we're good with all that. Yeah. So I'm going to finish that. I want to extrude this shape, but I want 5 millimeters. And so there's my overall shape. Now, you know, a gasket has a hole cut in the middle. And so now we're going to cut the inside of this out. So I'm going to start a new sketch on this surface. And it automatically projected the geometry. As you can see, the yellow highlights. If it did not project your geometry, then go here and project geometry and choose that surface. Okay, and then you'll get the geometry projected out there. Okay. Now we're going to do an offset. Here's a command right here, offset. And before I click anything, I'm going to right click and make sure that these two options are selected, the loop select and the constraint offset. I want to make sure that those are selected. And so I click my profile, that closed loop goes all the way around, and I start dragging it in, and then I can give it a dimension here, or I can dimension it later, but I want it to come in 15 millimeters. Okay, and you can notice it's constrained to the outside of the object. Okay, so I could come in and edit it, but everything right now is constrained to be 15 millimeters in. And so let's finish that sketch and do a cut. 5 millimeters is fine. That was the original thickness, or you could do through all. Okay. And so I cut it out. And there's my gasket. My dimensions are the outside edges, and I just did the offset for the inside edge. Now, before I go any further, I want to go back here. One thing I thought about in here, this dimension, you notice this 180 dimension. When we created the dimensions, we went from line to intersection of these two lines. So this point right here is the projected intersection of these two lines. It is not the quadrant of the arc or the center point of the arc. So if your dimension is not to that projection or the intersection of those lines, then you'll need to kind of go back and fix that. Okay. So if that's good, you got your extrusion, you got your cut, everything is cool. Now our boss said we need to make a change. It needs to be 150 millimeters tall, not 120. Okay, and see, it changed everything. If you did not get a change, you may have to come up here to do a local update at some point in your work, okay, when you're making these changes. So there it is. It should be 150 millimeters from the top edge here to the bottom edge there. Outside, the fillets on the exterior side should be 20 millimeters, and everything's cool. If you got questions, send us an email or come see us, okay? Yes, as before, you'll save this according to Blackboard and submit it there in the Dropbox.